of work that we call the Business Confidence Index. It started life as a survey among British businesses domiciled in Indonesia. It grew to embrace European businesses domiciled in Indonesia, and around about now was to have been released including American businesses also domiciled in Indonesia. So a serious piece of work, and a piece of work delivered to many of the government apparatus and institutions in Indonesia. I think it would not be difficult for you to guess what would be the top 3 impediments or challenges as stated by businesses already in country. And they have been traditionally across the 7 years, legal uncertainty, a complex regulatory environment, and corruption. Okay, but the 4th one that has also been very, very significant and increasing slightly every year in prominence is this challenge of relating to people, human resources, the acquisition, development, and retention of talent. And as an organization, always trying to deepen our relevance and improve the value proposition for members, we have been grappling with what BritCham can do to support its members. And a few months ago, we established the BritCham Education Centre. This is a centre that will work with, in the first instance, universities to provide Indonesian students with a much more informed basis for the qualifications that they want to do, based on the needs of our members in terms of what they're looking for, but also based on the pillars of growth and development that represent priorities for Indonesia, where there are gaps as well. And what we see very, very much is if Indonesia is going to achieve its growth ambition, moving up the value chain, becoming a more relevant player regionally, then it is definitely going to have to bridge a skills gap. It's a pleasure to be on this particular webinar with Tim. NOCN is a BritCham member, and one that we are working with as a chamber in particular to be able to embrace more opportunity to provide recognition and accreditation maybe for British companies that have offerings that are relevant to this particular marketplace. So I would just like to close my introduction by saying that there is considerable support from the Chamber for the initiative of attempting to raise standards in terms of vocational training and development. It is our belief that Indonesia's international relevance will grow as an outcome of international collaboration, and this is an excellent starting point for that. With that, I look forward to being a sort of passive participant in this discussion, but very, very keen to hear the presentations and also to observe the views and the conversation as it goes on. Once again, my pleasure on behalf of BritCham, and here to support.
Thank you so much, Chris. I'm just going to mute everybody. So everyone, while you're in the call today, please do turn your microphones off, keep yourself muted, and that way, because we are recording this and everyone will get a copy at the end. So please do make sure you've muted yourselves throughout the call. I'm just going to do that now. And then Tim, over to you. I'll launch your presentation and away you go.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you for joining us and for those words. And thank you everyone for giving up your time. I know at the moment there is so many webinars out there, so many people trying to get our attention online. So I do thank you for choosing to be with us today, and we'll try and keep it fast-paced, upbeat and informative. The chat function is running while I'm talking. Craig will be checking the chat. If he thinks there is an interesting question or something we need to explore further, he will shout at me and we'll stop and we'll explore that area. And when he's presenting later on, it'll be my delight to interrupt him as well and shout at him and throw questions at him. So if you do have a question, please let's get it on the chat and explore it. The purpose of this session, oh, we're moving to the slides. Sorry, that just caught me off guard slightly. The purpose of this session, next slide please, Craig. I've never controlled my slides from one country to another. So I'm pressing a button on my desk here in Malaysia, and that somehow changes the slides in Indonesia. It's a fantastic system. So we're very, very delighted that we've had the support of the British Council Chamber, but also from BNSP. We thank our colleagues in Indonesia for their support. The themes that we're going to talk about, they are based on our current experiences here in Southeast Asia, but they are relevant to UK and global skills. We're all going through the same situation. We're all facing the same challenges. So although the initial concept was to start a discussion around skills in Southeast Asia, I hope those people who aren't immediately in that area will take some interest from this. I have colleagues in NOCN around the world who are there to support and to guide you, and I'll tell you a little bit more about our global network as we continue. If you could move on to the next slide, please, Craig. Another picture of me. So I am I'm the regional manager for NOCN, based here in Malaysia, in Kuala Lumpur, most of the time until March the 10th, which was my last flight. I've been traveling extensively in Southeast Asia, talking to people about vocational training and how we at NOCN can support people in developing internationally recognized solutions. Since then, lockdown in KL. Next slide, please. I've been working in this sector for nearly 20 years now, working in the exam board, qualification sector of further education. And I'm very fortunate that for the last few years, I've been working alongside NOCN. NOCN Group is a large and wondrous organization with many different elements to it. We have in the region of 700 different qualifications that cover about 14 different subject areas. We're broken into different subsectors. We have C-Skills, which is our construction sector qualifications. We have NOCN Awards, which is our mainstream qualifications. Next slide, please, Craig. We also have One Awards, which is an awarding organization that operates with universities and with pathways to universities and is recognized by a slightly different body, by the QAA. We have an arm of the organization that operates in India, and we also have an arm of the organization that runs the job card scheme in the UK for the construction sector. And we're seeing some interesting innovations around that area and that card scheme being used to support the construction industry coming back to work in the UK. It's an interesting new innovation, and I'm going to talk a little later on about the speed at which the current environment is driving innovations in our sector at a very fast rate, which makes it a very exciting time to be in the business, as well as a very challenging one. Next slide, please, Craig. This is the slide that I use to try and explain to people who aren't completely sure what an awarding organisation does. So, Craig, you're going to have to follow me on this. So, Ofqual is the UK government body for qualifications. It allows organisations under very strict licence to develop and run qualifications. NOCN Group is one of those organisations. So the functions that we fulfil under government licence are to collaborate with providers and employers to develop qualifications. From there, the qualifications are picked up and taken by training organisations and delivered to their learners. Our role then is to quality assure that those qualifications are delivered to the right standard, that everything is maintained correctly, and that the students get the quality of experience and training that they deserve. And we also externally assess through examinations, in some cases through other assessment methodologies, the work of the students to ensure that outcomes are standardized across the world. And we also certificate the learner. So the learner will always receive an internationally recognized NOCN certificate for their studies through the training organization. One more click, Craig. And that completes the picture of really how an awarding organization operates. I hope that's not telling people things they already knew. Certainly when I was first shown this slide, I went, oh, I get it. But that was quite a few years ago now. So that's the nature of our organization. Next slide, please, Craig. So we were formed about 34 years ago in the UK, but now been working overseas for about the last 8 years. I think India is where we've been most established, and spent a lot of time doing consultancy on the development of qualifications and now of apprenticeships in India. But you can see from the list that we're active in a wide range of countries. I'm sorry, this is a lot of background on NOCN, but I think it's quite important to establish who we are, and then we can talk about how we're working in the current environment and the challenges that we're facing. So internationally, we work as an awarding organization. We work to train trainers, and we also work as a consultancy organization. And compared to a lot of awarding organizations, we do quite a great deal of consultancy, both in the UK and around the world. And it's part really of our brand that we're involved in moving the awarding organization, the standards sector. We're involved in moving it forward, not just being part of it. We want to see it getting better and improving. Next slide, please, Craig. This is the last of the slides about us. You'll be pleased to hear. We are involved in many different industry sectors, particularly involved in construction, education, as I mentioned, and we're now getting more and more involved in the oil and gas industry, as well as in hospitality and retail. So we're involved in many of the sectors that are currently affected by the COVID pandemic. But of course, every sector is impacted in some way by it at the moment and in the future. So I wanted to give you a picture of the type of organization we are. We are very much a pillar of the vocational training structure of education in the UK and increasingly around the world. Next slide, please, Craig. So that was what was happening until kind of early February. And now, of course, we're struck by the tragedy of the pandemic. And everything changes very quickly. And I think that it's interesting that straight away we're seeing how people are learning and what they're learning is changing straight away and at a speed that's really quite breathtaking. Online learning has seen massive growth, and you're hearing people say all the time, that's it, it's changed forever, we'll never go back. Well, we'll see. We're going to see job roles changing as we come out of the pandemic, and it's interesting, we're starting to see that now in Southeast Asia. We can see that the job roles are changing and things are moving forward. But the education sector is in a strange place. We see that half of the education world is furloughed or laid off, and the other half is moving very quickly and are very hungry for the opening of the markets. And so it's a very interesting time to be in education. It's certainly scary, definitely challenging, but we will come out of this looking different. And that's what we're here to discuss and to look at and to try and anticipate. And one of my personal worries, which I think I'm over now, is the idea that the education sector would become isolated through this period of time, as we see less and less movement from country to country, and the mindset being a bit more locked in everyone's home country. I think it's great that I'm seeing already the global community reaching out to each other and getting more involved. So I think that's very encouraging. Next slide, please, Craig. So that's the change that's happened to us. I have to talk very much from a personal and professional, from a corporate perspective. So I'm talking from NOCN's perspective. We were already on the road to developing more online solutions. We were already on the road to a lot of the things that are now getting used and talked about more in where the future of education is going to go. Engaging content for online is absolutely essential, and we're busy developing that. We're looking at more flexible approaches to online assessment, allowing assessment to reach out further, because this supports our global activity, that we can work remotely and reach further afield with assessment. A lot of what we were doing was supporting Industry 4.0, a big hot topic out here in Southeast Asia, making sure that we were getting people ready for the digital transformation. So all this work was already happening before the COVID virus impacted. But it really positions us very strongly to keep moving on these areas. It suggests that we were heading in the right area. When I say we, I mean the education sector, not just NOCN. In TVET, we were looking at more short programs. We're looking at short programs that upskilled and reskilled. Again, that's the right direction of travel for building out of the pandemic crisis. And also we were looking at the need for more and more digital skills and digital recognition to create new training programs. So that was the direction of travel. And when you look at what we need now, I'm reassured that the education sector was, or the vocational skills sector was heading in the right direction. But of course, we have been brought to quite a fierce stop with the current situation. Next slide, please, Craig. So the changes that we see happening now as a result, so this is really over the last 8 weeks as a result of dealing with the immediate impact of the crisis and really starting to work through how we can sustain ourselves as a sector during these times. There has been an absolutely phenomenal growth in online learning, which causes concerns for parts of the industry like myself. I mean, it's great that people are finding a way to carry on learning. That's fantastic, but not all online learning is great online learning. Online learning isn't universally available to people, but it's fantastic that it's happened. It's an emergency response to what's going on. In the TVET sector, that's not happened. Because of its dependence on passing on skills, when we talk about online learning continuing, it may well be in universities, in schools, but when we're looking at practical skills, it hasn't all stopped, obviously, but it's been a major blow. And because we see that the sector is really supported by so many private organisations, both in the UK and overseas, those private organisations don't get the same support, don't get the same money as government institutions. And so globally, we are seeing training organisations going out of business very quickly, which is very worrying because that's what we rely on in the vocational training sector. We rely heavily on strong independent trainers delivering the skills that industry needs. So that is going to be a big concern for the future, and we do need to see support for those independent training providers to get them back into building us up again after the crisis dies down. I can't say it's going to go away, so after the crisis dies down. Another thing we're seeing is things like this. We're seeing communities coming together online, sharing problems, sharing ideas. I've certainly been involved in a number of them. I'm involved in an English language group, which we meet globally on a Saturday night, but for my time zone, they meet at 11 o'clock on a Saturday night, which is great because I'd rather be nowhere else than on an online English language community. It is a very lively community. It's great, and feeling the passion and the commitment of those English language trainers, it's great to be a part of. It makes you think, yes, we will remain a global community. From our perspective, as a regulatory organisation within education, we are seeing areas accepting online assessment where previously they wouldn't, which is a very interesting development for us. So we're seeing areas such as English language speaking being the examination being carried out remotely with a live speaker 7,000 miles away from where the exam is being set. We're seeing sectors that previously have not accepted online training, such as the security sector, now opening up to online training because it's a necessity. We can't be reliant on shipping one trainer from one country to another. It's not going to happen. We have to embrace the online learning opportunities where they are. And in the UK, we are very much involved in apprenticeships, and we're seeing the assessment of apprenticeships, which traditionally is very much an eyes-on, a hands-on type of assessment, now moving to a remote assessment. We're looking at the best technology that can support that. We're looking at video evidence, we're looking at live online interviews to support that. And all these things are possible. We can make the shift. And we can make the shift maybe long-term, maybe short-term, depending on the impact on quality. And we are, like many other people, investing in the future of online assessment and proctoring, and the idea that we can monitor an examination remotely. I know that around the world a lot of moves have been made on this, and it's now starting to move into the mainstream for serious qualifications, and we're certainly very much committed to bringing that to certain numbers of our qualifications, and all these things are getting boosted and accelerated because of the COVID situation, and we're also adopting wider models to moderation and quality assurance, and carrying out remote audits on colleges and training providers and offering remote support. Where in the past, the sector's been very dependent on sending someone into the organisation, sending someone to have eyes on the organisation. We're now getting much more involved in how we can do that remotely. I've just had a message from Craig telling me to shut up and answer a question. So Craig, sorry, I was absorbed in my subject. What's the question?
I'm not sure I would tell you to shut up, but close enough. We did have a question in the chat. Is NOCN actively involved in high-level dialogues with education and HRD ministries in the countries you are presently in to encourage them to support and recognise online education and programs? If not, is there an agenda to move that forward?
The countries that we get involved in, we always try to get involved in multiple layers. It's no good just going at the bottom, no good just going at the top. So if we're involved in operating in a country, we are always reaching out to the authorities within that country to gain recognition, to gain understanding, to gain support for what we do. Certainly in countries that I know best, like Malaysia, there is very much a live conversation about accepting online learning, and we tend to work through our centres who are accessing that government funding and work with them on that. We would support anyone who is operating an approved NOCN centre and they wanted us to getting involved in that conversation with them about the recognition of online learning. I'm going to mention a little bit more about online learning because online learning isn't always the right answer. Right now it's solving a huge amount of problems and filling the gap. Generally, we advocate that online learning, distance learning, or a blended approach, providing that it supports the learning outcomes, is absolutely acceptable. So yes, I'd be interested to know which country that is and how we can support.
Thanks, Tim.
Okay. I think it's next slide time, please.
I think that's your slides, Tim. Oh, here we go.
So this answers the question about is online learning the answer to everything? And it's not. I mean, the fact that we've got a huge shift across to online learning. The fact that we hear numbers about, I think 120 million students in China studying from TV programs. Around the globe, we see everyone supporting the current situation with online learning. And that's great, but it shouldn't last. It shouldn't last because it's disadvantaging a large number of learners, particularly in poorer areas of the world, and particularly where we're looking at subjects that require skills to be transferred either through a hands-on or one-to-one approach. So online learning is great. Best practice will stay with us, but we are going to go back to, my belief, we are going to go back to something closer to the traditional model, because it's really not sustainable. We don't have the infrastructure globally to support online learning. World Bank has predicted that 70% of countries only have minimal distance learning capabilities. Many reports have come out talking about the divide that will be created in education if we push too hard and too far with online learning. Culturally, we know in some places, some countries, it's just not recognised and not accessible to everyone. So we will see a pushback. We will see a pushback, but good practice will stick. Best practice will stick. Where a learner can really benefit from online support, we will see continued growth in that area, but we will see a shift back to online learning. Next slide, please, Craig. So I'm moving on now from not how we're going to learn, and Craig's going to talk a lot more about that anyway, but I want to talk about what we're going to learn. Vocational awarding organisations, the vocational sector is driven by what industry needs. And what industry needs is going to change at a faster pace than we've seen in a long time. I was trying to think whether I could come up with a clever phrase about this being an industrial revolution 5.0 instead of 4.0, but that's the kind of change we're going to go through. You can see it really in everyday activity. Malaysia is starting to unlock. And it's interesting, we're seeing the role of security guards changing. We're seeing the role of waiting staff in restaurants changing. And that's really just the tiny tip of the iceberg. So many of our daily activities are going to change in one way or another. And it might only be for the next 2 or 4 years, but it may well be for longer, depending on what happens next. And we really don't know. So this is really just a story based on where we know at this point. We're already seeing that construction standards are starting to change to allow construction sites to operate with new safety procedures in place. We're definitely seeing the role of security guards changing. I've never had my temperature taken so many times by so many security guards. And it's a little fun moment as the security guard takes your temperature, but the implications of that temperature test not being done correctly, not being recorded correctly, there's a lot of responsibility in that little interaction. And the first time I had my temperature taken, I thought, well, as a foreigner here on a working visa going into temporary accommodation, if this guy stops me going in here, my life story suddenly goes in a very different way and involves me possibly going to a hospital and then getting probably shipped back to the UK, unable to work in the country, based on this guy's interpretation of my temperature. So we're going to see a lot of different skills coming into different areas. Everyone's going to be talking business continuity planning. Everyone's going to be wanting to get upskilled and reskilled in that area. And we are going to see, I think, a big shift in how hospitality and public-facing staff are trained over the next 6 months or so. How does that happen? How does that happen? This is really where an awarding organisation like NOCN comes into action. That first slide that I took you through, the build-up slide, illustrates that we're involved in developing qualifications. And this is my list, my experience built up of 15 or so years in product development, looking at how qualifications come to life. They come to life through practical experience and daily routine often impacted on by new legal advice and industry standards, which then creates new standards, new national occupational standards or operating procedures. These then get accepted at a corporate level, and there becomes a real demand from business to have a training program that meets that. That's when your innovators come into the sector. Innovators like my good friend Craig, who'll be talking soon, come into this space then and say, right, here's a real need. The industry wants this qualification, and they work with us to create a program, often getting it endorsed by us in the first instance. This gives it third-party recognition, and the individual gets a certificate which is widely recognized. Then you shift to the next level of national adoption, and we've seen this in many sectors over the years of NOCN creating qualifications that become nationally adopted, and then they're in a position to be taken up by the education mainstream. And then we seek to get international recognition. So there's a clear pathway, and I can already see we're in a position, we're kind of in their position 3, really, in Malaysia, as we see new standard operating procedures coming into certain industries, and those industries scrabbling to train their staff and get ready to operate under these procedures. So if there's anyone out there at any one of these stages involved in this process, this is an area that NOCN is very much experienced in, and can contribute a lot to this process, my 9-step process for international recognition of qualifications. Craig's moved me on. It must be a sign that I've been talking too long. So my conclusions are that we will see the education sector become smarter and more flexible through the short-term challenges that we're dealing with at the moment. Online is a great solution for now, but we need to go back to reaching out to everyone and teaching to everyone. The TVET sector is going to be so important over the next few years, building back up the economy, building back up the workforce. We had a big job on our hands previously with the shift to digitization, but now we've got a lot more people unemployed, we've got a lot of new skills required, a lot of retraining required. The TVET sector really needs to be supported and to fill up that space. And we're going to see a lot of new standards and skills required, and that's where the education sector can work with industry, working closely with industry, can create those new programs. I think that is my last slide, Craig. Thank you very much, everyone. That's the end of me talking at you. If there are any particular questions relating to that section, which you haven't had a chance to raise, then please put them in the chat. My contact details are available all over the place on this presentation. So if there's anything that you would like to pick up following this this presentation, please reach out to me. I think I'm going to pass over to Craig now. Give me a nod if you're ready, Craig.
Totally ready.
They're always ready, always ready. So thank you very much for being patient with me, and I'm going to pass you across to my colleague Craig, who's going to give you a perspective from a training organisation, an innovative training organisation that we've been working with now for about 6 months. Craig, over to you.
Thank you. So we've been answering many of the questions so far in the chat. So we've kind of caught up with everything. So everybody, if you have some further questions, please do drop them in the chat, and particularly about what I'll share briefly, because I want to honour your time and make sure we finish on time within the next 20 minutes, including question time. So do drop your questions in the chat, and we will get to them very soon as well. I'm just going to share my screen with you and just get out of the PowerPoint for now. Just give me a second, get this ready for you. Tim, thank you so much for what you shared. It's very, very good for people to have an idea of where NOCN is from and what NOCN does, because it's a powerful organisation. And correct me if I'm wrong, Tim, over 2,000 institutions around the world are NOCN institutions, correct? He's got his microphone muted, so we'll just take a nod as yes. Alrighty, so let's jump into this. I hope to give you a practical training organization, educational organization perspective. And I know that we've got here with us today people who are from ministries of education, from BNSP as well. We've got people from NOCN, we've got people from all around the world. Whether you're a government department, whether you're a training provider, an educational institution, or you are a student or a staff member, I hope that you can get some ideas from what I share to either give as inspiration to other training organizations, or if you're a training organization, you can pick that up and run with that idea yourself. So I'm the director of the University of Applied Research and Development, the head of centre for NOCN for the university. I'm a Google certified innovator and Microsoft master trainer. What this means is I really like technology and how it impacts education. My PhD is in creative technologies. So these really are unprecedented times, with many of these things happening, including school closures, which really hits hard on agencies, organizations, departments, and institutions' ability to deliver what it was formed to do. But the key point is none of us are alone in that. Whatever level of the education sector we're at, we're not alone. It's the same deal in Nepal, India, New Zealand, Australia, and England. When I talk to Google certified educators around the world on my network and other NOCN members, it's the same story. Regardless of the level that we're at, we're facing the same sort of things, but at different stages. So in Indonesia, we're on a kind of, but not really lockdown. Malaysia's come out of hard lockdown. Nepal is in hard lockdown. New Zealand is one stage away from complete freedom. So we're all at different stages in these unprecedented times. So really now is a time for us to think about where are the gaps? Where are the gaps? Over the last 6 months, last year, last 10 years, I'm sure in your organization, whatever it is, you've thought, oh, I should work on that, but I don't have time. I'm sure you have. I don't have time or the focus or the energy right now. But right now is the opportunity to think, where are the gaps? Where are the gaps that we can now focus our energy and our time on? Because that's actually what we have available as our time. And so really in this new normal, because as Tim said, things won't be the same. We'll go back to some of what it was like, but it won't ever be as it was. There are new business models that are available right now. We've seen that people are always on. They have their smart device. People are using and making database decisions. People are working remotely at high speed. The velocity has really sped up because people are expected to respond. And people are integrating in terms of qualifications. We need to recognize with new business models, how do we use data-based information to give us the step up to fill a gap that was always there? How do we capture this always online community and generation? How do we move ahead with speed? How do we give recognition of prior learning and use software to help us integrate things? I'm sure that as you look around, and I'm looking in the chat on my mobile phone while I'm speaking to you, I'm sure if you can write in the chat right now, what do you think is happening around you that you see? Number one, you can see organizations that are hunkered down and they're conserving. They're trying to stay together until the lockdown gets lifted. They're trying to stay together and keep the staff together until things change. They're saving money and trying to protect themselves. Then there are the other organizations that are building deeper and building wider. They're innovating, they're investing in new things right now. What do you think, what do you see is happening around you? Put an H and H if you're Australian, and H, but I'm a Kiwi, and H if you think people are hunkering down, put an H. If you think people around you that you see are building deeper and wider to exploit and take an opportunity of the gaps, put a B. So an H if you think they're conserving and protecting, hunkering down, or a B if you think they're building deeper and building wider. Okay, I can see some Bs in the chat. I'm expecting a variety, but it's great to see some Bs straight away, some with H and B, okay. I'm seeing many different responses to the situation with people that I see and work with on a day-to-day basis. Lots of different responses in the chat. Thank you so much for participating. Right now, we can actually spend our time or we can invest our time. There's a distinction here. We can spend our time or invest our time. How are you in your organization using your time? So Hootsuite did a global research project right now as part of COVID-19. What are people doing? Are they spending more time on devices, yes or no? The answer is unequivocally yes. Females, 79% of females said yes, I'm spending more time on the mobile or smartphone, and males, 74%. That is an opportunity. It is not a blockage, it is an opportunity. It is an opportunity for every industry organisation, every training provider, every qualification provider. Now, I have the privilege of partnering with the Wild Geese Group, Wild Geese Academy, and Samson Tiara Waguna. Samson Tiara Waguna is a foundation in Indonesia, and Wild Geese Group and Wild Geese Academy is in Malaysia. Both of these organisations have contributed significantly over decades to the oil and gas industry with safety standard training. And we've partnered with them to develop qualifications to allow industry professionals to get recognition of prior learning. We started prior to COVID. Now, Wild Geese Group, here this is Tim Alsop, Sir Tim Alsop, the CEO of Wild Geese Group. This is in the Remote Learning Centre, which delivers the OPITO industry standards, which have never been done in the world before ever like this. And they developed this in the last 3 months, and they launched it last week. Now, he launched it last week, his team launched it last week. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to flick, if I can, to a video. You may not be able to hear it completely well, but I hope you can. So I'll just and hopefully you can hear this.
Buttons all along the top are simple press on, press off. What I'd like you to do, Rob, is press on the ESD for me. You'll see once we're actioned, the button will light red to indicate that you've made that action. Now click ESD off for me, Rob. That's obviously indicated you.
So the perfect thing that you've just seen is that through innovation and deciding to build deeper and build wider, Tim Alsop, Mike Herman, who you just saw then, and the team from Wild Geese Group and Wild Geese Academy, they have launched a world first with remote training to anyone in the world to do industry safety standard training. Same thing, something they've been doing for decades, but not remotely. They are the first in the world to do it. And they've chosen to invest their time right now in innovating and exploiting that gap because there's a real need. People on oil rigs must be kept safe. They've provided a solution, a solution to the gap in the market. This is a wonderful innovation that Wild Geese Group have done, one of the partners of my university. So right now is a time to be brave. I'll give you some examples. From the USA, I've hired a content writer through a website called Upwork. Any one of you in any of your organizations could hire someone anywhere in the world for a few dollars to write content for your website. I've hired a video and podcast editor to do our emergency response and risk management podcast and our video cast. Right now, we are working with an organization in the USA who has delivered child protection training all around the world for the last 30 years, and yet no one has been able to receive a qualification. So we've developed a master's and a postgraduate diploma program for Stop the Silence to deliver all around the world in child protection. One of the organizations we were working with prior to COVID-19 was Storm. Storm oversees education in India. Fantastic organization. For 20 years has been helping students find universities of their choice. They developed a mobile app. Before COVID hit, they had 30,000 downloads on their app. After COVID hit in the first month, 66,000 students had downloaded the Storm app to find, how do I get access to education in this environment? So in talking and collaborating with Storm, just like we did with Samson Tiara Waguna, just like we did with Wild Geese Group, we said, hey, where's the gap? How can we support you with the gap? So we've developed 2 diplomas that students with that app on their phone anywhere in the world can access 2 diplomas in digital transformation and digital productivity from our NOCN accredited institution. I have a Masters in Education program which we plan to deliver in Nepal starting on March the 14th. What happened? COVID hit. 5 days before I was meant to fly to Nepal, lockdown. I couldn't get on a plane. So what did we do? We decided to move everything online immediately. We did the launch on the 14th but by Zoom. We moved everything into a private Facebook group. And I just want to see if I can show you this quickly here. This is our private Facebook group. Tim, can you turn on your microphone for me and just say yes, that you can see my Facebook group, Tim? Maybe you can type in the chat if you can't turn your mic on. If you can see this, please type a yes in the chat for me, anybody. Awesome, I've got a yes, thank you. So this is our private Facebook group. Now, Facebook, and anyone in the world can use this. If you're a training provider, do this. Jump onto Facebook, set up a private group, and make sure you go in the settings and set it up with the social learning theme. On the left-hand side, you can see discussion, units, members, events, videos, photos, and insights. So I can see who is doing what. Here are our units of learning. Here's one here, learning design and technology. We've already finished learning design and technology. We're now onto educational leadership. But you can see I'm posting information for the students. You can see videos. Here's me on a Zoom call live with students in Nepal, and we're chatting away and talking about our session and learning together. Not the assignment, not educational leadership. Okay. There's me being stern. So you can see I'm delivering the posts, I'm delivering support, I'm critiquing the students' work, doing exactly what I would do in the classroom. Doing exactly what I would do in the classroom, but I'm doing it here inside the Facebook group. This is an incredible opportunity so that you can see for free with the social platform, you can do what we were doing in the classroom. And then, secondly, with Google Classroom, I have all of the assessments, all of the marks, everything ready to go. So everything I'd normally do in the classroom, I can do straight away online. And the students never miss anything. So I'd really encourage you to be brave. Really encourage you to be brave. Just like I showed you with Tim, where he's testing the new system for approval with the industry standing body. Test some things. Get your industry standard bodies involved. Get them to see what you're doing. This is what Tim's doing, it's what I'm doing. It's a time to be brave. Launch something, try something, show the industry bodies what you're doing and get their approval so you can carry on with strength and backing. Also, there's an organization in Kazakhstan. We're developing a Bachelor and a Master's of Science in Occupational Therapy. So we're doing many things around the world. We're doing it now. We've launched it now. We've invested our time and our energy into launching things to fill the gap now. So here's just my takeaways I'd love you to get in the last 2 minutes. Build stronger. Think, are you using a social platform for learning? With the University of Applied Research and Development, we are using social learning platforms. Why? Because there's multimedia and it's on a social platform. We have learning content accessible 24/7. There's interaction through forums and chats and video. It's mobile friendly. Things like Facebook and Google are designed for mobile. Assessments are transparent. Students can see the rubrics, the deadlines, negotiate, completely finish their course online. I would encourage you to be brave. I would encourage you to see the gaps. I would encourage you to build stronger. I would encourage you to partner with people like we have and build bigger and deeper. So when you come out of this situation and you move back into the new normal, that you're stronger, deeper, wider, more innovative, ready to capture a wider market. Awesome. What I'm going to do is turn Tim's microphone back on. Going to unmute you, Tim. Tim, I'm pushing the button. Go ahead.
Thank you. You kept asking me to comment, and you had me muted. You had me locked down. My own little lockdown. Thank you very much, Craig. That is there's some fascinating stuff in there that you've been doing. I think the idea about being brave is brilliant. That's what we need to do now. It's hard to be brave at the moment, but it's going to have its rewards. I've spent time with Wild Geese. I was there when we were shooting that video of them testing their online system, and it really is it's cutting edge in how they're trying to shift the training forward. So that if there's any questions that haven't been already asked, now would be the time to ask them. Please either shout or type them into the chat. I will carry on filling while you consider if there's any more questions. We hope that today has been useful. I'd very much like to think this is something we could continue to keep rolling out, maybe every 2 weeks. I am very open to what can be discussed here. I'd like in a future session to discuss apprenticeships and how they're evolving, not only in the UK but around the world. But I am open to suggestions about what people would like to bring to this forum. I want it to be a forum that recognises what people are talking about. I've just had a mention there from Fabienne. She's talking about vocational pathways into university, which is an area that One Awards are looking at. I think that would be a good subject for us to discuss maybe in the next session as well. There's a lot of interest in level 3 and level 4 programs that can be taken remotely, but then lead into a university program. That removes the risk of not being able to travel in the short term. So that's an example of something we can talk about in the future. Please, let's keep connected. I would really welcome your thoughts on whether today's been useful. And let's keep this thing going. Throw some ideas at me. We will be emailing you all off the back of the information you've shared with us on the sign up to this. And thank you again for giving us your time this afternoon. Are there any other questions?
Just one final one. Do we think that certain organisations will see the use of remote assessment as a cost-saving measure, such as travel and overnight stays?
I think it is a cost-saving measure, but from an awarding body and exam body point of view, nothing overshadows quality. No cost saving is worth reducing the quality and the rigor that's put into education, because then it becomes useless and pointless. So if we discover that we can save some costs but get the same outcome, that's good for everyone, because it means there's less cost for the training provider as well. If it impacts on quality, absolutely not.
If you think about what Tim at Wild Geese Group has done, and they've been testing the system as you saw, Tim. So Tim from Wild Geese Group, to get approval from their industry body for that use, that's innovative, that's exciting. That means people actually don't have to travel overnight and be offshore, off their rig. And they can do that training highly effective, a number of scenarios, and not lose downtime on the rig as well. So I think there's a win-win for the organisation and the actual person, the client, the student that's going through it. So it's a fantastic thing. I think it's a win-win.
Okay, well, we're exactly on the hour. So I think at that point, we'll wind it up. I'd like to say again, thank you everyone for joining us. Please keep the questions coming through. My email address is plastered all over the place, and we will be sending it through to you. The plan is to do something again in 2 weeks' time. I'd like suggestions on content to come from you, those people that have endured me talking at you for the last 40 minutes. So thank you again. Stay safe, and I hope that we all speak again soon. Thank you.